Welcome to our Woman in Tech 2050 webinar. We only have some days to finish March, so we still have time to keep honoring, right, the Women History Month. Today I have 4 exceptional tech leaders here that will kick off the discussion. My name is Fausta Ballesteros. I'm Wizeline CMO and Culture and Experience Officer. And as we say, we are here. We only have some days to end March. So we thought it was a perfect time to keep reflecting on the significant contribution of some women in technology and look forward to the next 25 years, right? So first, I would like to introduce Amy Troutman. She's an experienced leader of global teams in the streaming, media, mobile technology, and networking industries. Today, she's the VP of Software Test Engineering at Televisa Univision, overseeing the quality for the big streaming service across US and Latin America. But in the past, she also she was the director of 4QA for HBO streaming, including the Game of Thrones finale. That's kind of a webinar itself that we can do at some time. She have extensive experience also in the mobile industry, from directing hand testing for T-Mobile USA to really playing a key role in launching the first Android phones globally. So welcome, Amy, and thanks for being here. We have Lisa as well. Lisa Kam, she's a product leader of global engineering and product teams in the development of large-scale technology solutions. Today, she's the head of product and design at Dow Jones, driving product strategy and user experience. She also brings extensive skills and leadership from her former roles at Google and the New York Times, where she led large-scale tech solutions and user experience initiatives. And she also worked with other industry giants like IBM, American Express, and JP Morgan. And also she has a deep background leading teams across multiple geographies and translating technical issues into clear business impact. That's a lot, Lisa. So thank you here for being with us. We also have Laura Diddleson from Aviation. She also have 20 years of experience as an HR executive and business leader in global healthcare and health tech organizations. Now she's the head of HR for Evidation, and she's been there for 7 years, right, building the air function in a fast-paced environment. She has also in the past executive HR roles at Verve Surgical and Siemens, with experience in surgical robotics, ultrasound, radiation, oncology, microbiology, and molecular business. And also when she was expatriated in Germany with Siemens, she was working with semiconductor and automotive industries. Very interesting stuff as well, right? So thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Laura, for being here as well. And helping moderate or drive the question is our own Inés Casares. She's the Wizeline Chief Service Officer. She's also a seasoned leader in the tech industry with over 20 years of experience in IT and consulting. Prior to Wizeline, she was the VP of Digital Engineer at Cognizant, the country head of Argentina for Sufficient, and she spent more than 10 years as well as global, including being the head of delivery. And so thank you, Inés, for driving this conversation. Before I let you start, in housekeeping, right, we are recording this webinar, so if you want to then share it or listen it again, you will have that opportunity, and we'll be answering questions at the end. There's at the bottom of the screens, there's a Q&A bottom with a question mark. That's where you can add your questions, so we'll have more time at the end to answer them. Thank you again.
Thank you, Fausta. Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us. Tech is so interesting. It brings together so many of us, so much experience and such interesting journeys. Thank you, everybody who's joined. I think we have a lot of our Wizeliners here. I think also Lisa, Amy, and Laura's teams are around. So thank you here for coming here and encouraging and listening to the conversation. Why are we hosting this discussion? We truly relate with the International Women's Day theme of Accelerate Action. Here at Wizeline, we really believe in having those powerful conversations that lead into action. So what we expect is that this panel will not only inspire you and entertain you, but that you will also get out of here with very specific, practical, positive ideas that you can all implement in your environment. I will certainly be paying a lot of attention and hoping to pick up some good things that we can do at Wizeline so that we can continue to write our story as a narrative that is both built of women and men's achievements. So that's our purpose here. Okay, let's get started. As you know, there's going to be an opportunity for questions. I will be picking those at the end. Hopefully, we'll have enough time to answer a few of those. So thank you. I'm going to start by asking Lisa, Amy, Laura, why are you here? What inspired you to participate in this panel discussion?
I would say I'm just always excited to have the opportunity to talk to smart women and, to hear different perspectives. I think you could tell just from the introduction, we've all had quite a journey in our careers. And so it's just a great opportunity to get together and learn and share.
Wonderful, thank you. Lisa, what got you here?
I love, there's so many things that sort of discourage women from careers in tech, and a career in tech's been so rewarding for me that anything I can do to help people see a path that they could stay on and they could really enjoy. I love having those conversations and also just making things better to the extent I can in the orgs I work in for women in tech.
Thank you. That's very insightful. Laura?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Evidation Health, many of you may not be familiar with. You can find us both on the App Store and just at evidation.com if you want to learn more. I'm just grateful for the platform to talk about who we are, what we do. Evidation was co-founded and built by women and has long prioritized creating space for inclusive innovation. And so this is the perfect platform to be alongside of all of you to talk about that a little bit.
Thank you, Laura. To Lisa's point, I always reflect on the survivorship bias. Like, we are here telling the story because we made it, and therefore we have this responsibility for not only sharing those stories, but also creating different environments for more and more women to be able to tell their stories in the future. So in that respect, tell us a little bit about your experience or your journey within your own organizations now or in the past. You're all obviously accomplished with impressive credentials. Were there any programs or specific initiatives or actions that you participated that helped you get to where you are today? Laura, you want to start?
Sure. So first, I'm actually not a technologist by education. I've just spent my entire career in technology as an enabler, actually. And it wasn't necessarily by design. And I think, what I was born and raised in the Midwest and just kind of got the bug to travel the world. Ended up landing at one of the biggest companies in the world, Siemens, and got the chance to relocate 5 times around the world. It brought me back to California ultimately. But I think the most important thing about my journey is that I always had a plan and I never followed it. So I was always looking for being curious and surrounding myself with people. I had a lot of women bosses, a lot of women mentors. I don't think any particular program. It was more just the opportunities and being open for things that I just didn't know about and listening to things and looking for not necessarily advancing my career. And because my motivation was not that, it actually ended up happening. So for me, it was really about just building a portfolio, although I wouldn't have said it that way at the time. It just, and when you look back and reflect on all the opportunities, being able to to spend time on both coasts, and being able to just meet so many interesting people along the way that helped shape the journey and helped inform the next decision. And one of the things, I think that led to my success is that I never took a job that I didn't want, hoping it would lead to something I did want. Because you always want to make sure that you can maintain your edge, the thing that makes you special, the thing that brings the passion and the performance in the moment. And so always take that next thing that is exciting. So it's okay to have a plan and also not to follow it.
Wonderful. I totally relate. Amy, do you want to go next?
Sure. I do come from an engineering background. I had a couple degrees in electrical engineering and began my career as a hardware engineer. I worked for a very large company. It was part of Hughes Aircraft, which was a massive company, hundreds, if not thousands, of engineers worldwide. And I was the first woman hardware engineer they had ever hired in their history. So that was fun. I always say it led to a weird side effect. I had a modeling career because they used my picture in all of their recruiting literature because I was diversity. So I have magazines with my pictures in. You get a lot of comments from your colleagues when you're posing for photographers in the lab. Strange, place to be, being the only one. After a few years of doing hardware, I was interested in software. I just like to learn new things and was looking around for opportunities. And I interviewed with a company where a man said flat out to my face, "You know nothing about software, but you seem smart. I can teach you." And I was smart enough to take that job because the fact that he was willing to teach, and he was a great teacher, he was a brilliant software architect. I quickly learned that while I definitely did not have a software background, I had colleagues who had, 10, 20 years more experience than I did, and they were also learning from him. And that became part of what I've looked for my whole career, is find the people willing to teach. And often that may not be the manager or the leader, it's somebody else on the team. It's somebody, with an expertise you don't have. As I've gone into leadership roles, it's sometimes an employee who is an expert in something that I am not, but you can learn from people. Because if you look at my career, this was not a planned journey. I went from hardware, software, I've done project management. I went from multiple industries of networking to cellular to streaming. Could not have predicted any of that. I'm now really focused on quality assurance. But it was always looking for an opportunity to learn something, to do something different, and then to apply all the skills I had. It's like, well, I don't know anything about this, but I know something about that, and I can bring that in here and make something interesting out of it. So I think it was really, I've done management training courses. I had the most interesting one of that was actually one at Nokia, because it was all led by clinical psychologists. And so it wasn't a typical training course. It was more like, this is how your brain works. And this is how you can tell how other people's brains work. And it was very interesting in just, helping you figure out what you are good at, what you're interested in, what really, excites you in interesting ways. But I think for me, it's just been, look for where's the next door open that I can do something, that builds my journey.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. What about you, Lisa? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm interested in how similar some of our stories are, not in the details, but at the core of them. Because as we were talking about just a little while ago, I went to law school and came out as an HTML coder, which was a thing at the time. It was a long, long time ago. So I certainly didn't go out with a plan to be in tech, but I followed things I was interested in. I followed people I liked to work with. I followed problems I wanted to solve. And for a long time, I was focused on getting promoted and moving vertically. And at a certain point, I kind of gave up on that because I kept hitting brick walls. And instead, I started doing the interesting horizontal problems that nobody else wanted. And ironically, those were the things that in time got me the breadth of knowledge I needed to do the leadership roles and did eventually lead to those more senior roles. But in terms of training classes, I found very few of them really easy to make stick. So go and you listen. I finally decided that the best thing I could do was to try and walk out of every training course with one thing I was going to keep in my mind and keep focused on and really try and track for myself some level of change around it. That coming out of a training course and trying to implement the course never got me anywhere. But if I came out of a course that stressed a lot of things about leadership, and I remember one talked a lot about being present when you're talking to people. I'm like, that's somewhere I'm not doing well. Let me focus on that with my team. And, over time, as you get sent to lots of these classes, you pick up lots of skills. But I do, but it's one at a time. It's not everything. But yeah, jump at opportunities, and also if someone wants to mentor you, lean into that. I've had a couple of mentors who have just helped me see what I was capable of.
So many interesting concepts here. I love the point about focusing on those interesting horizontal problems. And yes, indeed, everybody's career seems to have been not a planned journey, and a little bit unpredictable. Part of that is because this industry was kind of growing up, and also maybe there weren't as many women role models to follow in a predictable path. So you paved your own path. So that's wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about the industries that you have experience in. Are there any differences, or is there any particular industry further along when it comes to advancement of women in tech versus others? I would love to hear your experience. Lisa, you may start.
Great. I've bounced through a bunch of different industries, doing technology in all of them. And what I found is that the big tech, the Silicon Valley tech companies are hard for women to work at. That it's just tough. I've moved, and these days my current role and my last role are at New York-based media companies. And while I'm not going to say that things are perfect, I find that I don't have to prove myself in every room. There's an assumption I know what I'm doing that I did not find in big tech. So I do think, I don't know if it's geography and if it's Silicon Valley or if it's the media industry, but I definitely see that differences across orgs.
Certainly. Amy?
I was just going to say I see the same thing with media. And, because I've also come from, networking, cellular, big, tech, hardware and software companies. My theory is in media, there just are more women in the creative side of it, in the production side of it, the media creation side, the parts of the company I always say I don't work in, where they're actually, making the entertainment. But I think it does, there are just more women around, and that helps level the playing field a bit when, you're not the only one, this is certainly, we've come a long way since I was in that position, but yeah, I think there is a difference. The big tech companies, yes, they have a certain culture, and you have to be pretty tough, to get heard. And you have to be used to being like, hey, I am, the only one who looks like me in this room.
Yeah. So let's hear a little bit about the automotive, semiconductor, healthcare industries that Laura has been in
Well, the
case.
automotive was a very long time ago. I would say, I mean, I spent the last 20 years in healthcare. So the journey to healthcare came through Siemens, and that's where I had automotive, semiconductor, and went through a number of different industries there. But once I landed in healthcare, there was something that resonated that was different than other things. And since I had my first role in healthcare in Germany, I have not found the same sort of vision oriented talent that I have there. And so I have continuously looked for new things in that space. Evidation is unique. This is most of my time in healthcare until Evidation was in heavy metal and hardware. So lots of real estate, lots of labs, and now in digital health tech, that's a completely different space. There are a lot of women in this space. And while I do live in the Silicon Valley area and have now for almost 20 years, I think, what Lisa and Amy are saying, I think it's true. It is difficult. And once you have people who can break through, in the case of our company with having women founders, I mean, the ability to attract talent when you have women running the company is amazing. And I don't just mean female talent, but all of the talent of what that brings to the healthcare space when you're doing kind of the personalized approach, where we are connecting directly with participants to help realize and improve their health journey. It's phenomenal. So I think there are places for exceptions, and I have been very fortunate to find some of those and hopefully to at least minimally influence when I'm in those companies of how the companies show up for attracting and retaining talent and just how we show up as an organization.
That's super interesting, and I think we have to be mindful of the fact that the decision making, it gets different when there's a diverse set of leaders making those decisions. That's why we'll be seeing more and more different leadership patterns and different types of decisions as more and more women step into leadership roles and stay and persevere. So talking about showing up and doing things, right? We've already talked a little bit about the theme. It's accelerate action. We've obviously and thankfully been talking about this for years. It's time to really accelerate actions and do very specific programs or initiatives that embody that theme. So I would love to hear from you if there's anything currently in your organization, whether it's under your leadership or close to your leadership, that you see as something very valuable that you'd want to share with this goal of advancing the theme of taking action and giving more access and more participation to women. Whoever wants to start.
I'll jump in with one that's not targeted at women, but I expect will disproportionately help women.
Okay.
When I joined Dow Jones recently, we didn't have clarity around job ladders in a number of our places or what you have to do, which meant to get promoted, you got promoted if somebody, this is not, I mean, you didn't necessarily have a clear path, but if somebody pulled you aside, male or female, and said, hey, this is sort of what they're looking for, this is sort of what you need to know, this is sort of the thing, it could help you figure out what you needed to do. But if you weren't in those whisper networks, and this is the same everywhere, I don't want to imply it isn't. If critical information only exists in those whisper networks, people who aren't pulled aside don't have the same opportunities. So by developing things like job ladders, and where everybody can look at the same clear documented standards, the people who are less likely to have been pulled aside and told, oh, you need to be doing this or you need to be doing that. It's sort of a way to level the playing field. I don't think anyone's doing this intentionally, but if they're mostly men around and they talk to, and they have more casual relationships and sort of friendly relationships with other men, they're more likely to get that insight. So let's just push it and make it let everybody know and get out of that environment. And I've seen
that's very insightful.
every company. I don't want to be pointing fingers at everyone. It's just
Mhm.
more clear you can be, the better it is for everyone. And I think women tend to benefit most, but it's not just beneficial for them.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I agree completely with what Lisa's saying. And, having spent the most of my career at a very large company, there are a lot of things that you learn that don't necessarily exist at a small company. It's one of the things that we did at Evidation, though, is to create a competency framework, which includes exactly what it looks like for every level, for every role, a lot of documentation. It took our entire manager community. I want to give a shout out to, if any of you are there today, to build this content that will, and I think it's right. It does disproportionately positively impact women who in some cases may be less assertive about asking that, but would be curious to take a look and understand. And also, we look at promotions as a company. So those are not done in silos. That is done, and each one is approved by our CEO every single time we do it. So that there is that transparency around how we do things and what opportunities are available. At the same time, what I will say as a startup, programs are a little harder to fund. So one of the questions I ask in any interview that I'm conducting is, how does this role contribute to your growth and development goals? Because, we really believe that the opportunities that are provided are so unique and so broad that it's the on the job part. I mean, programs, it sounds easy if you say it fast, but as Lisa said earlier, how much can you take away? But those things that are then part of the fabric of your experience and what you do every single day, as how you work with clients, how you work internally, those are some of the best growth and development opportunities. And it's really important that you figure out how you can tell your story using those experiences. It doesn't have to be about a program. There's so many ways to inform that.
Wonderful. Indeed. Amy, do you want to add to that?
I was just going to add that, something I'm very conscious of is just making sure, especially when hiring or putting teams together, that women are getting considered. I'm going to hire the best candidate in the end of the day, but if I'm hiring and I'm not seeing resumes from women, or I'm not seeing women coming through the interview, I'm going to go get some, and I think I I notice that I tend to end up with maybe a higher percentage of women in my teams than some other teams in my organizations. And it's not that I'm doing it like I'm only going to hire women or I've got a quota system, but I'm making sure that I'm searching for some, that I've got a diverse talent pool. And I think that that is important to, starting and building a team. And then, yes, what Laura and Lisa have said about, finding the ways then to advance people and to get, people where they're trying to go in their career, and making that a more, open opportunity, is certainly important. But first, you've got to get women in on the team.
Yeah, and I want to ask you more specifically, in your experience, what do women do different than men in the recruiting process, in the way they go about interviews, in the way they put together their resumes? Is there something that you have observed women do different and that may kind of become a disadvantage, or otherwise, right?
And
I think we may be about to say the same thing. I think women undersell themselves. I think women are taught, to be very modest and to say, well, I was a software engineer and I wrote Java and that's it. I'm very conscious when I'm reading resumes that if I have one that looks okay, but I think that name is a female name, that might go in the yes pile because that might be somebody who's really great who has written a very modest resume. So you could say there that I might be screening a bit differently. But I think like studies have borne this out. If you write a job description and you list 58 things in there, a woman won't apply if she doesn't think she's good at all 58. And a man might apply
Mm-hmm.
if he once saw a computer. It's just a very different mindset. And I think studies have borne this out. So I'm also conscious now when I write job descriptions, they're much less specific than the job descriptions I wrote, say 20 years ago, because I don't
Oh,
want
I
to
see.
put people off.
I see.
If I can just, when I was
Sure.
joined Google as a user experience manager, I was stunned that there was only one woman designer on my team. The rest were all men. And this is design. There are women designers out there. There wasn't a lack in the industry. And the hiring process worked in such a way that I screened all the resumes, but then I passed it off for other people for phone screen for interviews and then for final hiring decision. So my only part of the process was to decide who got into that initial screen, and then it went through. And so I did the same thing Amy was talking about and started working on the assumption that women were underselling themselves and men were slightly overselling themselves, and passed more women through to that screening process and the rest. Didn't tell anyone I was doing this. They got no other advantages. They just got the opportunity to speak to their talents. And within a year, we got, actually about 18 months, we got to 50-50 on the team as a gender split. And all that took was letting more women have a chance to speak to their talents because they didn't put it in their resume. So sell yourself in your resume. It's like make or break.
That is very, very insightful. Laura, you wanted to add something?
Something small.
Mm.
I agree with Amy and Lisa's experiences. Just to add to that, we always want to make sure that an interview panel includes a diverse group as well, because people will show up differently depending on who they're talking to, and you want to just bear out as much as you can about how that, I mean, it's kind of amazing when you think about how much information you might have about an internal candidate and how little information you have about an external candidate. And a lot of times people feel comfortable to go with, I'll coin the phrase, the devil you don't know versus the devil you know, because we all have strengths and weaknesses. And people get comfortable with just what they don't know, like that's better. I would argue that's mostly not true, because you know what you can work with, and you know what opportunities the person has to improve. But making sure that the panel is also diverse, cross-functional, and that people who have a very specific skill set, that they are forced to talk about more than that, because you're hiring the whole person. You're trying to add to the culture that you have in your company, and also of who you might put in front of clients. And so that aspect of the process is really important as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like our clients are a diverse set of clients most of the times, or all of the time. So why wouldn't we also represent that? Wonderful. Thank you for all these insights. Well, we are all very young leaders here, but we've been around for a bit, and maybe it was different 20, 25 years ago. I think we certainly paved the way for the current generation of women. I would love to hear from you. Do you feel it's more equitable? What has been gained here? What are kind of the things that now look better for women? Are there any experiences, or do you want to compare a little bit of the environment in tech now versus a few years back? Amy?
I think there's certainly, it would be more unusual now to have the experience I did in my first job of being like, we've never hired a woman before. What are you? I think, just the numbers of women in the workforce in general, not just in tech, but, that has certainly gotten better. You would certainly have to go out of your way and work for only, very small specific places, to say, I haven't worked with a woman. I think just, some of this is just numbers and more women working in general. And I think, while I still wish there were a lot more women engineers than there are, I'm still frustrated that, we're still most engineers, the numbers are still very, very skewed toward more men. But just in companies in general, you find more women, if they aren't the engineers, there's women in product, there's women in project management, there's women in marketing, companies are much more diverse in general, I think, than they were 25 years ago. Is it perfect? No. Is there still opportunities, especially for women in technical leadership roles? The further up the tech chain you go, the fewer women you find. That still, I think, needs a lot of improvement. But it's getting much better, from certainly where I started, where it's just, we don't know what to do with you. So yeah, there's hope.
What about you, Laura?
So I agree with Amy, for sure. There are still a lot of gaps. And I think one of those has to do with um, the family aspect of, how I mean, I as an executive, I had to take 2 maternity leaves, and I remember feeling unbelievably insecure about what that was going to mean for my career. It was a priority for me to have a family. I didn't want to have to give up my career, and I am incredibly grateful for the support that at the time it was Siemens Healthcare provided for both of those leaves, in terms of just what happened when I was out and just warmly welcoming me back. I had really no idea what people were dealing with until I became a mom and exec at the same time, who was still traveling the world. Like, what in the world people are dealing with. It has just informed my policy writing, my empathy, how I show up for the people around me, or even people I don't work with. It's incredibly difficult, and I do think it does influence a lot of decision making in hiring, in promotion, especially if you've got small teams. And we've worked really hard. We have provided so much support, from a startup perspective. And I've been incredibly grateful for the leadership, at Evidation, that they have been open and willing to differentiate themselves in that space. So I do think that's hard. And a completely different angle as far as progress, since I work for a women co-founded company, there's been a lot of progress in that space. Not as much as we would like to see, but even, compared to their um, male co-founders, the money that is given to female founders is still less, and that's not great. Although there's a lot of data around that startups with at least one female founder have outperformed the male-only teams by 63% in some early stage portfolios. So there's a lot of data to support that, but it is a hard road, and a lot of the women I work with are moms also, and so they're doing all of those things and more, to support the companies who are obviously very diverse, and women who are following in those footsteps.
Wonderful, thank you. Lisa, do you want to add to that?
So I would absolutely, in the very, very early days of like when everything technology was a startup, it was kind of a free-for-all. And at that point, I felt less like there were more women around in roles just because nobody knew anything. It was just chaos. And then we sort of went through the first .com fallout. And after that, it was all men. It's like that shook all of the women out of the market. And I think people sort of start at that point and think from there. And from there, it's definitely improved, but there's such a long way to go in a lot of spaces, leadership, actual software development, hardware development, the sort of those areas, there are definitely more gaps. And until there are more women in leadership, until there are more women in leadership, it's harder for women to get ahead and get recognized and get the mentorship they need. So, as we all progress, it matters so much that we make sure that the other women coming after us get a fair shake. Not get promoted over anyone else, but get the opportunities, get the information, get the chance to show what they can do. And I think that is helping, that as more women, and not enough, but as more women reach more senior roles, it does open up space behind them. Once again, not enough, not fast enough, but it is an improvement.
Yeah, it is certainly happening, and it's curious to hear if you've seen women leadership style that maybe 20 years ago was a very rare thing. There was just a very the male leadership style was all that was to see, right? So are there any good news in that space? Have you seen more and more women leading with full authenticity and just being women leaders and very different from male leaders, and that's okay and that's good? Have you seen some of that?
I think I have, and it is a very good thing. I think, I said earlier, like if you come through some of the tech companies, like you had to be tough. And I saw, I had a woman manager at one company, and she was just so tough. Like she was to the point where you're not empathetic, you're not a nice person. Like it was just, I'm battling every day. Um, I'm hoping that more women now can actually show up and be themselves. And again, not just women, like everybody should be able to do this, that you don't have to put on the act, of just like, I've got to go in there and knock everybody else down and, fight my way through. You do it your own way. And I think, again, this is still in an evolution, but I do, think that is getting better, hope that is getting better.
Thank you for that, Amy. Laura, you wanted to add something?
I just smiling, agreeing with Amy, absolutely. Back a while ago, I feel like we were taught how to adapt our style to fit in with the style of the company, which you could say was a more male style. And I feel like that has evolved just as more women are paving the way and creating, giving us the courage to be vulnerable, to try different things. I work for some very tough women, and I would say, it's about being tough and kind, always thinking about the company and the individual. That each, what are the behaviors that motivate top performance? And how you show up for people, how you communicate with them, how you build the relationship with them and provide helpful feedback all the time, can create incredible performance opportunities. And so toughness is good. It depends on, the flavor of that toughness and how you tailor it just specifically to the situation, specifically to the individual, because I mean, beginning with the end in mind, not something I made up, but understanding what are you trying to motivate? That I think a lot of women and men, of course, have been over the years much more comfortable to bring themselves, and to create the space for people to be successful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are going to have one more question and then move to Q&A. I have to ask a little bit about AI, right? So interested in hearing if any of you has a perspective. Looking ahead, do you think, obviously AI will continue to dramatically impact our industry. Is that positive, negative, or not relevant when it comes to women in tech? Would love to hear one of you.
I'll take a stab at that. I think, I look at my career and think that I've seen two major tech disruptors that I would say. One would be the internet, and the second would be mobile phones and cellular. Both of those completely changed the world to the point where it's hard to remember what it was like before then, and it wasn't that long ago. And both of those did some very positive things for the world, and both of those did some very negative things. And I don't think as a society, we still understand where we've landed because we're still in it. We're still in that change. And AI to me is going to be the same. There's going to be some wonderful positives. There's going to be some things that are negatives. The one thing I do think is hugely important is for women to get involved and get in there and start using these tools to solve the problems that are interesting to us and that we want to solve. Because otherwise the tech companies will do it for us and we may not like what they build, or it might not be something useful for us. You know, I had a conversation with somebody last week and they were saying, you know, if AI can generate code and can do that accurately, you may have just opened up application development to people who have never learned how to write software. And that could be amazing, because now people who never had the educational opportunity or a particular aptitude or interest can suddenly create. And so I think the cheap answer is we don't know what AI is going to do, but it is going to definitely have a change and definitely huge opportunities for women if we take them and if we really get in there.
So get involved. That's the message. Let's make sure we get involved. Okay, finally, for all of you, very quickly, true or false? Women in tech should be excited at what the next 25 years look like with respect to career as well as personal development opportunities. Is that true or false?
True.
True.
Wonderful. Ending on a super positive note. Thank you. This has been wonderful. I would have loved to keep talking about 3 or 4 of these topics that came up. I'm sure we'll have opportunities to continue deepening the thought leadership there. Let's go to our wonderful participants' questions. Thank you for that. I have a lot of questions. The first one is very, very specific, very practical. How do you select a mentor?
Honestly,
Maybe some advice.
My best mentors have selected me as opposed to vice versa. If you go to somebody and say, will you mentor me? It's less likely you'll be able to develop that authentic relationship that you really need to get that value. Taking opportunities to work with people you need to learn from and getting to know them in the process seems to be what's worked best for me in finding mentors.
100%. 100% agree with Lisa. It's about getting in front of people. It's about making a connection. And at some point, maybe you're even being mentored without calling it that. Sometimes people are afraid of, what does it mean? What are my obligations? What's the reporting around that? It can just be a relationship. So it's about connecting with people. And, mentoring it doesn't have to be always someone who's knows how to get you where you want to go. It can also be someone who's more of a contrarian to that, someone who can help you think differently, who can challenge you. So it's not about being comfortable. It's about creating new comfort zones I would like to say, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's where you have the real innovation in your career.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a true formal mentor. I'm going to mentor you. It's kind of what I said in the beginning. Look for the people who are willing to share information, who are willing to teach you something. Whether that is on a project you're working on or whether that is you eat lunch together and talk. But look for, there are people who will not share information, who will hold on to it because it's like their special secret. Don't mess with those people. Look for the cool people who are very open and are interested to talk, and you'll learn all sorts of different things.
Yeah, so I think we can take away, be open, show yourself as someone who is willing to learn, to be challenged. Like that brings some vulnerability, but also some openness, and that will bring probably good mentors around. But also, if you're already in a position to be a mentor, then be one. Look for those people that are craving for that. And I personally look back at my career, and what makes me smile is the people that I've mentored, the women and men that I've mentored and I've seen succeed or find kind of thrive in their careers and be happy as human beings. So certainly let's take it as an action to continue with the mentorship movement, which is so beneficial. Okay, this is maybe related to the leadership style. What would you suggest to someone who thinks she is surrounded at times by individuals who confuse kindness for softness or being a pushover? I want to continue making an impact as a woman in the industry, and I don't know if I should change my personality to be more fit with this competitive environment. Lisa, go
I will
ahead.
jump in on this one with a book recommendation. There is a wonderful book called Machiavelli for Women, which talks about the trap of women needing to be perceived as nice. And it's a really interesting book. It starts from the perspective of, let's just be, this is not trying to change the world we have to work in. It's trying to figure out how to have women apply techniques to get ahead given those changes. And it provides lots of very specific recommendations for how you can still speak sweetly while getting your point across without giving things up, without being a pushover, while still presenting yourself in the mold of nice that is often necessary for women to be heard. It's the only thing I've ever read that actually is like specific advice on that topic.
I think there's also a big difference. First of all, don't change your personality, please. I think there's a big difference between being nice and being kind, treating people with dignity and respect. And what the way I like to think about it is there's no room for not being kind. For treating people disrespectfully. Never. There is no situation where that's appropriate. And you want to it's if you can create more opportunities to be direct, to be clear. It's where where you start being vague or not being concrete or direct, that ends up being perceived as softer. So I like to couple directness and kindness together. Therefore, you're not, it's not too nice. There's always that trap, and it's an iterative process. And some people will interpret it differently, where you have to be more direct than others. But definitely don't change your personality. And at some point, sometimes it just you need a change of scenery. Not every person fits in every company at every time and every job, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to move on. So, don't feel like you're beating your head against the wall if you don't feel like you fit in a certain place. It's okay. No one fits everywhere.
Yeah,
Thank you, Laura.
I would agree with that. And I would also just say, you can still be nice, but make sure you are being heard. And depending on the company culture, I have worked in companies where you had to be the loudest person in the room, or you had to dominate the whiteboard and you had to be the one with the marker in your hand. That is not my natural personality. So you don't have to change your personality, but if you recognize that's the situation, don't let people steamroll you. Even if you have to get up and march to the whiteboard, like, do it. You can still do that and be your authentic self, but let them know you are in the room and you are going to make a decision. That's where, don't let them push you over. But yeah, like I say, you can do that without having to do a total personality change.
We've got this question. What would you say to women with young children who are trying to balance work and parenting, especially as it comes to deciding which roles to take?
That's such a great question. I think company culture is everything here, because that is a bumpy road. I mean, to be able to even, just show up at work sometimes feels difficult. And so having an understanding with your manager, with the HR team, understanding from a policy perspective and just a practicality, how is that applied? Is there the level of understanding that it's going to take for you to be successful? So I think having open conversations, I mean, that is a real thing. And there are people who do not have families or children who who can still understand this. It's not that you have to have that experience in order to understand it. But don't set yourself up for failure or to feel like you're disappointing someone. It can absolutely, in every job, make you better to have that kind of balance. You can be more efficient. You can be better at setting boundaries. But that it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a village, not only to raise a family, but in the work environment to make that successful. So I think company culture, you need to understand if your company is willing to support that and if they have the culture that can handle it.
Wonderful. Maybe the final question, can you share some advice on things we should focus more and things we should stop doing when moving to a more senior leadership position or role?
I think the hardest thing to learn to stop doing is you have to learn to let other people do it. When you're an engineer or whatever role you start off in, you're hands-on, all of your success comes from what you yourself can do. I built this software, or I, delivered this project. And suddenly, as you start managing people, you have to let other people do it. And that can be terrifying and frustrating because they're not doing it the way you would do it. And oh, you love your way. I think that for me was one of the hardest things to learn is, give people the tools they need to do it, get obstacles out of their way, but let them work. And, sometimes they will do it a completely different way than you would have done it. And guess what? Their way may be better. It's it's a tough thing to do because you were so, good at doing it yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We have a lot of questions. We'll have to organize another panel, Fausta. And somebody suggested we should also have men in the panel. So hoping we can do that soon. And we're going to close with some final comments, if you wish. And that will be it for today. We have 2 more minutes left. Laura, what would be your final advice or words?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. It's been incredible to be alongside of all of you today. So thank you so much. I guess just a few final words. And this is not just unique for advice for women, but in general, I would say make sure that you demonstrate consistency of character. Show up every time, be the person other people want to work with. You never know who your next decision maker is going to be. So consistency in every interaction, that people know what they're getting. You can still be innovative, but consistency of character. Don't orient yourself around one person's narrative about how your career should go. There are a million ways to get to where you want to go, and you may not even know where you want to go yet. And learn how to tell your story in that way. And then lastly, differentiate yourself. Go first and get good at using the words other people find hard to use. Like, that's my responsibility. I apologize. Things that people find very hard to say that have been perceived as weakness are actually strengths and key differentiators that you can use in your career. Thanks again.
Thank you, Laura. Lisa?
This panel's been awesome, and everything that Laura and Amy have said has just rung so true to me. I guess at the end of the day is do the things in tech that you really enjoy or you really get excited about, because that comes through. And so do that. And tech's a lot of fun. I mean, it is work. It'll always be jobs that are rough and months in wonderful jobs that are nightmarish, but enjoy it. Enjoy what you're doing.
Thank you. Amy?
I would say, I agree this panel has been great. I've really enjoyed it. And, tech is constantly changing. There's no way I could have predicted anything that I have worked on when I started my career. Tech, it is the wonderful thing about tech, and it is the frustrating thing, is it's always obsolete. It's always changing. It's always going in new directions. So if you find yourself in a frustrating situation, or you find yourself in a company that you don't feel is valuing you, look for something else. There are so many opportunities out there. And don't be afraid to get yourself out of a situation. If you don't like what you're working on, or you don't, like I say, if you feel you're not being valued or you're not being heard, someplace will value you, and there's another direction you can go in. And I think that's a wonderful thing about the tech space.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And I hope everybody's leaving with a few ideas, things to do. Remember, words without actions are not justice. We have to take action and accelerate action. Thank you, everyone, today.